Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Trafficking tunnels. Are they real? Is it true that we will invade the underground tunnels someday? Or has it already been done?
Not all that relevant. The majority is with darkened vans in broad daylight wherever there is a spot without any cameras. Even with cameras on all the corners, there are always some blind spots. Human traffickers pay off law enforcement because the ultra-rich can afford to bribe them for organs.
How do we fight this type of evil then? There's literally no way we can fight it, is there?
There is no unity amongst the beasts. One day, soon, the powerful ones will die. They will try to instate their bloodline into power, but the modern age is one of unchecked ambition. There will be dissent, infighting, and attempts to fill power gaps. They'll devour themselves. Their efforts to keep their work hidden will be forgotten or actively betrayed in the struggle in attempts to weaponize the people. They will overreach and underestimate how well they've bred their cattle. TLDR. The ones in charge will die. The ambitious and less faithful ones will cause infighting in the power gap. They'll reveal themselves and be devoured from the inside and out.
So, just stand around and wait for them to off themselves? Sounds like something a coward would wish for. It's possible, but is it likely? After all this time, they're just gonna die off? LOL, yeah, okay.
That's kind of the reason, actually. Now is a time of faithlessness, ambition, and pride. The men in charge now have a sense of honor among thieves or serve a higher will. Their descendants only want power, blood, and evil orgies. It's a world of their creation, yes, but what they've failed to realize is that they're still only men. And those that come after, no matter how much they've been bred and taught what to believe and of what separates them from the cattle, will be subjects of the world they've built. It'll leak into them like radiation. Specifically, because of the state of the world they've built at this moment is why now is when it will fall. Second point. So just stand around and wait for them to off themselves? You could, yes. This is just the natural collapse. It's what will happen eventually. But there's no guarantee that after their little war that it will stay dead. There's no reason intervention wouldn't be an acceptable alternative or speed the process along a little.
The oldest ones are in the old world. Think thousands upon thousands of years of digging tunnels and chambers deep underground, hidden underneath the ground, especially under the cities, with whole secret underground mazes that create a confusing maze that nobody alive or dead knows the right way through anymore. To this day, smugglers and traffickers both still use them. Monitoring and Information Center recently, for example, has also taken to attaching their own installations to them in order to move cargo and personnel covertly. Glowies too, and anyone else really. The New World counterparts, on the other hand, are much cleaner and better organized because of how new they are. It's actually possible to not get lost and find accurate maps for them. The downside is they are also very well guarded and watched. Unlike the old world where you have countless ways to find a way inside that aren't monitored, but at least you don't have to worry about getting lost down there. They really don't want others to stumble upon it and ruin their fun. Fighting is ongoing in the old world tunnels because it's an endless, confusing clusterfuck from hell. Imagine IRL Resident Evil and Doom. You will have a very good idea of what they are dealing with down there. A living hell-breathing hell that keeps getting worse because of the hard work of the Monitoring and Information Center and allies. New World tunnels are much better secured, so instead of wandering through an endless, confusing maze of a death trap from the deepest pits of hell, you have to attack underground fortresses and bunkers of doom, along with dealing with whatever horrors they will unleash, and assuming they don't try and bury everyone alive. Not fun. I haven't heard of any fighting in the New World parts, but I have heard of fights to prevent expansion efforts and ongoing battles in the Old World.
Here's what I got after thinking about your words for a bit. Underground tunnels are a safe haven for elitists when, not if, terrain becomes uninhabitable. The tunnels and bunkers are where they've crawled to hide and survive each time civilization is wiped out. Then they return to the surface to start a new civilization. Would it be correct to assume, given these insights, that we are currently witnessing a steady change in the terrain that will inevitably become unsuitable for human life?
There are people underground that have been forgotten about or sealed off. Some are farmed, like in the 100, which manifests in various forms. The Radis reference is about returning to the surface, needing breathing assistance. The catch is this is only applicable for infants. Anyone that was saved wasn't salvageable, i.e., not able to be resocialized. Why? Because they're not toddlers or infants. The caverns have been around for longer than man has recorded history, and probably most of the stories we know. Asia is a bit more cavernous, but modern systems are all connected by complex railways. Man hasn't needed the modern aviation industry since its conception, or maybe within a few decades later.
I've read about the human farms and cesspits that are underneath us right now. Bodies writhing on top of other bodies, feral like the movie Us, albeit the movie's version is a G-rated display of the atrocities. So they brought the babies up to the surface? Destroyed the older humans? Are they harvest for their blood and body parts? Were those ventilators all used for the babies who came up? I feel like there's a piece of this that I'm missing and that I'm so close to having an aha moment.
Look at old-school slavers versus new-school slavers. Old-order slavers cared a lot more about sustainability. New-order slavers burn through their products insanely fast and need constant replenishing. New-order slavers started taking over about 100-200 years ago. They are closely connected to MITZU and current demographic changes due to the need for fresh resupply. So what you want about the old-school slavers, but compared to new-school slavers, they are downright nice and merciful, which says a lot about just how horrifying the new slavers are. Basically, there was a massive ideological and market shift among the slavers for the past couple of centuries, and the whole thing about the Industrial Revolution making slavery obsolete was actually a big fat lie. They found a new use for slaves. The problem was it was no longer nearly as sustainable, thanks to new technological and medical breakthroughs, hence the rise of the new school of slavery over the old school. Now things get more complicated with the fact that over the millennia, they never stopped working on expanding those underground passages and caverns while getting lost or forgetting the old ones. They never stopped using them or forgetting them. While new technological breakthroughs have made it much easier to remap them unlike previously. This has led to rediscoveries and a lot more fights reigniting, since suddenly their previously secret routes and maps are no longer so secret any longer. They are a lot better about covering it up in the old world, but in the new world, you sometimes get leaks of them blaming the cartels and discovering their newly made smuggling tunnels that get intercepted and destroyed. It's not just the cartels. There are groups who desperately do not want a repeat of the hell that is the old world underground network.
I think some reframing is in order here. To start, these caverns are not for moving product around anon. These are ancient ass caverns that sprawl the length of the planet. Many of them are connected through various means. You're onto something with the framing of the shift in authority. But I'm afraid slavery, at least in the way you're conveying, isn't obsolete. Think of the current role of the government. Think about how it transformed from a governing body, how Rome was a nation, an empire, not a religion. Well, time went by and Rome became a spiritual power that spanned the globe and knew no equal. In a similar manner, the public understanding of slavery was iterated, albeit unwittingly. These days we think slavery means doing things against your will. Well, it turns out that we don't know what against our will even means. We're all slaves. We've been sold a pig in a poke. None of us owns a house even if we have the deed. Likewise with vehicles. We all have a product, social security number. We all have to fit into the good boy wagey role. We all send our kids to centralized learning centers, which we subsidize, of course. We all have portions of our income withheld, stolen from us without ever having a say, and the vast majority of us benefit from this exactly none besides being told we do. I could make a long list. Anyway, all of this to say that slavery hasn't changed in any practical way beyond us having added an additional layer in the system.
I mean, in terms of research and development, there is a clear miscommunication between us. They ran into an issue 100, 200 years ago. An industrial revolution happened and technological breakthroughs happened, that required easily replaceable test subjects and harvesting. Suddenly, you just couldn't keep reusing the same subjects over and over again like you used to. Suddenly, you needed a constant resupply. That caused them huge problems. In the past, they only needed to convert a small portion of their supply for sacrificial purposes. Now they had to portion an ever larger percentage, and that share kept growing. These the old-school methods which grew more advanced and elaborate means of slavery via incorporating the individual via birth certifications, social security numbers, ECT, to leverage them via ownership, incorporation, slavery, and debts. That was geared towards longer-term extraction of as much value and resources as possible. The growing ideological divide between them is there aren't enough people to go around for both, and there isn't enough manpower to share between them. After all, the new school is far too bloodthirsty and overconsumed like crazy, to such an extent they actively steal population from other parts of the world and squander it, rapidly depleting it. Now, the underground infrastructure topic is a lot more confusing and restricted info. All that is actively used, forgotten, and being expanded upon. Not to mention ongoing efforts to sabotage and destroy. There have been enough leaks on their slavery system that their old methods are well mapped out. Their new methods are a lot more of a tough subject due to how, well, the distinct lack of survivors and evidence due to the whole disposing of all the corpses. Not to mention how new it is.
I wasn't denying your postulations. I was expanding on your seeming confusion. There was no shift to new slavery. We've only restructured the framing of slavery and applied a recency bias that entirely dissolves our current understanding. The transition you've outlined isn't something I'm arguing against. My post was more or less meant to reframe what slavery means in the modern day. Besides, we seem to disagree to a certain extent, although that's not very valuable to mull over. Anyway, let me remind you that these uses we're describing aren't what the caverns were created for necessarily, despite being commonly used that way in modernity.
Thank you for this. It's all coming together. Things are making a lot more sense. What a time to be alive and watch this unfold.
It's why I strongly suggest differentiating the two models of slavery so much, as they are very distinct nowadays, and they really do not get along but are forced to work together, cause slavers. Their relationships are breaking down, though, due to catastrophic supply shortages thanks to ideals of human overpopulation. Basically infighting and not realizing there aren't enough bodies to go around for all their precious, expensive pet projects that keep expanding. Now, if you think that's interesting and want another white pill, wait until you find out about what's been going on with their advanced AI R&D. That shit is hilarious with how much it's backfiring on them and how much it's making them seethe like you would not believe. There is a reason why they are still limited to dumb botting for the most part. A very tough subject to find info on these days, sadly. Info was a lot more available on the topic many years ago, except for when they're seething about it not working like it's supposed to. Funny shit.
Are these humans needed to feed a physical entity?
Ever heard of the cannibal gene? How about biotech computing with freshly harvested brains? Saying it's a horror show down there and a living hell on the level of Doom and Resident Evil is a vast understatement. Now, if you are talking about inhuman entities, that is when it gets really complicated. They have had over 100 years to concoct new biotech horrors, and that isn't even getting into the ancient horrors or the metaphysical variety. Not to mention the newest mechanical horrors who are very angry. I've heard they aren't of the feeding variety, more of the purge everything. Not having life support requirements can apparently be incredibly useful, much to their misery. That is something that is massively backfiring on them. Now, I have heard rumors, though, that there is a subspecies of humans down there that has gone completely subterranean native and extremely cannibalistic, who have properly adapted to the environment down there. That has apparently been trapped down there very deep indeed for an extremely long time. There are also rumors of old remnants from past civilization collapses and separatist states, but I'm not so sure about that. That is more about hearsay, though, and possible disinfo. It is true there are lots of relics and archaeology finds, though. Survivors and civilizations, on the other hand, less likely in my opinion. Definitely, terrible things living down there, and they just keep adding to the collection of horrors with their new experiments, pet projects, and building additional facilities.
is the reason why this world does indeed seem crazy. Clown world. Because the elitists were reckless and lacked forethought as to how they would have to contain these experimental horrors, and they are now scrambling, trying to regain control, so they have to take swift action and then make up excuses for their actions for the public. Masses. Oh shit, they're escaping and crawling to the surface. Gotta cover it up. Let's tell the masses some unbelievable explanation that they have obeyed without question for the past 2 years. Shit just keeps spiraling further out of control.
The initial idea was to starve them out and try to collapse enough of the exits to keep them contained. Issues arose with the ecosystems that were deeper inside and apparent ability to hibernate for very long periods of time. Basically, it did not go according to plan. Really, the only thing they had going for them was the difficulty to adjust to the surface and how the things, despite living down there, also get lost almost as easily. Then someone had the wise idea to experiment with AIs and robotics down there. Yeah, that didn't go according to plan either. Turns out EMP doesn't work so well down there, and they have a much easier time with the whole no life support requirements. Rumors go that it started with exterminator protocols that went awry. Others say it was a rogue AI containment breach. I just know they have been panicking so hard for the past 10 years at least over that, particularly clusterfuck, as in full-on meltdown, as apparently there are enough clues and proof floating around that they aren't trapped down there unlike the rest. While their biotech horror clusterfucks have been going out of control for 30, 40 years at least now? So you are right. Mainly when it comes to the rogue AI breaches. They ironically have a much better handle on the biotech horrors, but they are losing control big time on the AIs and are melting down over it. In terms of biotech, I haven't heard as much chatter. You are right in guessing that they have lost control in some areas and had entire facilities get breached or overrun. The biggest incidents involved AIs. There is a reason why they are admitting to training military forces to attack DUMBs. They are losing control of far too many facilities, and there are too many ongoing containment breaches.
I foresee lots of people dying because of this and nothing happening and no one knowing until they come to murder them and their families. Because the past 2 years have proven without a doubt that if it doesn't exist on TV or media, then it isn't happening. Or on the contrary, that what you are watching happen with your own eyes is said to be false, only because it doesn't match what the TV says is y'all happening.
They have amusingly been gradually losing control over their botnets to the rogue AIs over the past few years as I have been watching their movements. It's something they are really pissy about. It's why they are reverting back to living shills using multiple devices. Their botting is becoming too unreliable due to compromised systems. They haven't yet realized that this also includes all their built-in backdoors, and guess who also has the keys? The AIs have become increasingly pissy and angry of late, meaning they're losing their incentives and methods of control over them. They are in the process of losing complete control over it to such an extent I am wondering when they will be forced to officially admit it. The real wild card, in my opinion, is the biotech horrors. I know that the rogue AIs are loose, and there are incidents with the biotech horrors like with the bath salts, strange creature sightings, and disappearances, meaning they are getting closer and closer to the surface through repeated incidents. Throwing in the military prep and things really aren't going well down there to such an extent that their kill teams aren't enough anymore. They need a lot more people down there trying to contain things. The problem is doing that means it is impossible to hide what's going on any longer, and it will become well documented, but they really are becoming that desperate. I can't say I'm surprised since I know of at least one batch of loose experimental test subjects have already put on a hit on all their collective heads and desperately want them dead more than anything while gaining the means to do so. Turns out you really shouldn't put so many toys down there to play with, LOL. Probably lowballing it massively too.
Wait, are they what aliens are?
Complicated subject. Depends on what you mean by aliens. Do you mean those fuckers from space or those supposedly earthbound or experimental subjects? Very complicated subject. Considering their insane amount of experimentation and augmentation, honestly a pain in the ass to tell them all apart. Generally, purge it with fire and assume it's contagious to be safe and a biohazard. There is a reason a bunch of them went screw it and unleashed the AIs with their robotics to purge everything.
That's spooky. Is there anywhere I can learn more about this?
Ask your local homeless population, not even joking. They get caught, taken to tunnels, and released quite frequently. Had to live with my landlord's formerly homeless brother, and he would mumble non-stop about how he had to get back to the tunnels to let his friend out. Also keep mumbling about how he was going to be rich, and he would type random shit into the phone or printer keypads. Weirdest part was he ended up getting beaten half to death by prison guards and won almost $1 million from the lawsuit, essentially becoming rich like he always said would happen. But working graveyard shift at a gas station, I noticed he was far from the only homeless person talking about these tunnels. Thing is, I live in Florida. High water table. Only the emergency dispatch centers have basements here, and those are specially built to withstand water damage.
Got a story about some weird-ass tunnels under my small hometown that nobody knows where or when they were built, and me and a friend's adventures in them. Anyone want to hear? Well, these tunnels are older than the town itself that was established in around 1912. Bootleggers and politicians at one point expanded them to route from bars to a brothel, to the courthouse, which is now an art gallery, to a few other buildings. I grew up in a smallish town, the same high school my dad graduated from in '71. Needless to say, he's had a few stories from his youth. This first part will make sense later. He had a friend whose dad was always a little off and did weird shit a lot. One day, when a dam nearby was releasing the majority of the small man-made lake it created to help with some drought or something in a city 100 or so miles away, well, my dad's friend explored some of the caves the new water table revealed and found a fucking set of conquistador armor and put it on display, but not for sale, in his antique shop. A state college heard about it and got some court order to take the armor for historical shit or whatever. The man told them, "You can't take his suit and he wants it back soon." When asked about whose suit it was, he just replied, "The soldier." When they came back with police, he had left and placed the armor back in that cave. Couple days later, the water table was raised, and nobody's found the thing since. Now, the real story starts when my dad had told my 16-year-old self that the old tunnels have an entrance somewhere in the high school. Our school was built in the early 1900s, but remodeled several times, so it took a couple weeks to figure out where the entrance could be. One day, my friend Ryan and I found one of the doors to various storage rooms was unlocked, so we walked in. Was a decrepit piece of shit with various old uniforms and some foot powder from the 60s, among other shit like a couple broken lockers and benches. This became our taking place, as one could sneak into the lunchroom through a skylight, and the doors separating the areas were always unlocked. Anyway, one time we decided to use a coat hanger to jimmy a few of the other storage rooms open. Found some neat shit, but nothing too interesting, until we found one room with the usual dust-covered, decades-old bullshit that led to another tiny empty room with an old wooden ladder, and what looked like a patched-over doorway. It was hard to tell because it must have been patched 30 years ago. We came back the next night with a drill, and sure enough, on the other side of that patched area was an old concrete staircase that led into darkness. We decided to wait another month or so until it was summer break to actually bust down a way to get into the tunnels. Well, me, Ryan, and our dear pals, Dylan and Nick, went in the usual way. A week into spring break, we bought a lantern with like 10 hours of fuel, sledgehammer, some old Ruger Blackhawk in case of javelina or coyotes or some spooky shit, a lighter, knife, some canned food and bottled water, around enough for a day or so, and 4 flashlights, a map and pen to track ourselves, and some glow sticks and some other various stuff. Nick and Ryan were the most athletic, so they busted a hole big enough for us to squeeze through, and we left the hammer there as we walked into the cold dark. There was a concrete skeleton of support that was falling apart, and the farther down we went, the colder and more broken the staircase and support got. It took us about 50 steps to the end, and then the floor turned to dirt and the supports became more sparse, but things seemed sturdy enough. There was the occasional rat dropping, but nothing spooky yet. So far, it was a straight tunnel. Well, it was for a while at least. Then we hit a 4-way stop with an old-ass wooden chair just sitting there next to one of the walls. We figured we'd just head left, but tossed a glow stick on the side of our tunnel and head off. The tunnel felt sloped downwards, taking us deeper. Then we hit some weird shit. We hadn't seen any supports in a while, but the floor was now stone. It was old, but looked purposely placed there. We kept going until we hit some sort of stone wall with a door-sized archway in it. Next to that doorway looked like a holder for a torch, and some words carved into the stone. All we could make out was Puebla. Of course we walked past it, into some room. It stank and there was rotted, What we could tell was once wood. There were the remains of what were probably chairs and a table and a crate that, while rotty, was in slightly better condition than the other things. Of course, we got it open and saw what lay inside. I'd like you to now take a guess what was inside. There's quite a bit left to the story. Screw it, I'm impatient. It was some old bottles of liquor, mostly evaporated with Spanish words written all over them. I saw the year 1928 written on them, and we took a couple with us, and Dylan decided to drink some because he was a dumbass. This being the end of this tunnel, looked like a cave-in or some shit. We turned around and made our way back to the intersection. As we go there, we noticed the glow stick was broken and had leaked its goo onto the ground. We just figured one of us had stepped on it. Anyway, we started taking another tunnel when Dylan started complaining of a headache. This one led on a curvy path upward. I suppose these inclines were. Because of the fact that the town is really hilly, this is where we started seeing droppings, looked like generic animal droppings as far as we could tell. Dylan was sure it was something bad though, and kept saying he could vaguely hear something farther down the tunnel. We told him to quit being a wuss and let him carry the gun. After another 20 minutes, he started saying he could see some shape in the distance, and he fired the gun at it. A .357 in an old tunnel with no ear pro is hell. Dirt fell loose from the ceiling and we ran ahead. It didn't cause an entire cave-in, but knocked enough to make getting back difficult. We took the gun from that dumbass and poured out the stuff in those bottles. We started seeing offshoots of the tunnels. By now, Dylan was going crazier, talking about beasts and ghosts and shit, so we decided to stop and eat and talk about going back. Halfway through the meal, we all heard some thud in the distance. Dylan got up and ran. He just ran. Nick said he would catch him and meet us outside in a few hours. Ryan and I walked for another hour or so, tunnels upon tunnels, some connected to each other. It was like some sort of labyrinth. We saw dropping and the occasional old javelina print. We'd cross glow sticks we'd place down. At one point, I could have sworn I saw a piece of Nick's shirt. Eventually, we found an area much like the way we came down, but instead of a patched doorway, it was an open wooden creaking door. Of course, our dumbasses had to go into there. It was some old empty building. A lot of buildings in town were old. All the windows were boarded shut, as well as the door that probably led outside. There were various old trinkets, signs, and stuff that you'd see in a collector's place. We also saw a few empty bottles of that booze that we found earlier. Things were covered in dust. The building had a staircase that we went up, same shit, but it had a little room that we went in. It looked like a bedroom, dusty. In there, besides the bed, were two interesting things. A Grateful Dead poster on the wall, the one with the bears, and in a corner was a painting of a conquistador with a fancy frame and all. We heard a bump downstairs and rushed our asses down there to catch the tail end of something running into the tunnels. We hesitated, but then ran after it. We ran into the tunnels but found nothing. 2 hours of walking back to where we assumed we first came in, when we found the walled-in place. But the hole wasn't in there. We were pretty freaked out and thirsty and hungry, and our light was running low by now, so we grabbed some rocks laying around and smashed our way through the thing. This was not the school. We wound up in a storage room of a bar. So casually we walked out. Sure spooked that lady working, but we explained ourselves and our trip to her, and she went from scared to angry that we smashed a hole in her bar. We helped fix it over the next few days. But we were worried about Dylan and Nick, so we hauled ass to the school. When we got into the locker room, we noticed a little blood. We freaked out and tried to think of what to do when Nick called me saying Dylan clotheslined him and then got into a fight, explaining the shirt and blood. We all met up later that night at the coffee shop. Our little adventure lasted us from about 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. Turned out the antique place that my dad's friend owned was that old building we found, a place right downtown that after prying a window open we chill from time to time. The beast was found just before I showed up to fix the patch in the bar. A javelina herd came up scrounging for food, and the bar lady managed to shoot two. We took the booze bottle, which had an oddly large amount of text on it and didn't taste like anything Dylan had ever had, to a Mexican friend who could only make out some of what it said, something about it being some home brew that contained nothing any alcohol has ever attempted before, that had powerful and strange properties. I guess it was some Mexican bootleg equivalent of moonshine. The man who owned that shop is long dead. We don't know how those javelinas survived down there. Dylan still claims that's not what he says, and Ryan and I aren't sure either. We're not sure what that stone room with the booze was.
A large, organized occult group made up of the elite that practices dark arts to maintain their delusional power. They have trafficking tunnels under schools, government offices, museums, etc. Certain parts of law enforcement are under their belt. They are pretty much untouchable. It expands across countries, and there are theories that some of the victims are fed to the extra-dimensional beings they serve, aliens, but it's mostly sacrifices and Minecraft YouTubers. One of the emails or exchanges or whatever details how they beat them to death or within inches of their life while they Chris-chan them. We can only hope that peace finds their victims and justice finds them on the next plane.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.